Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining our webinar, 4 Ways that Sangoma Enhances Skype for Business. We'll be focused on explaining what Skype for Business is and the ways that you can leverage Sangoma's solution. My name is Lisa Cito, and I am from Sangoma Technologies. Today, we are joined by Frederick Dickey, who is our VP of Customer Services and Product Management. Next, please. Perfect. Okay, so a little housekeeping note. So this is a 30-minute webinar format. So if you have any questions or comments, or if anything is unclear, please do type them into the questions panel on the right side of your webinar screen, and we will address your questions at the end of the presentation. As well, I'd just like to tell everyone that we'll be recording today's webinar. So these recordings will be shared on the main registration page at a later date, and you can review them at your own convenience. So without further ado, let's get started. Over to you, Frederick.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for the introduction. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. You're in large numbers, so that's always great to see. So what I'll do is a short presentation. I'll talk about several ways that Sangoma enhances or participates in the Skype for Business ecosystem. But first, what I'll do is, depending on the knowledge on the group here, on the session, I'll just do like a super quick introduction of what Skype for Business is, and then we'll jump right into the solutions that we provide around Skype for Business. So what is Skype for Business? Not too long ago, it used to be called Link 2013, or sometimes called Link Server 2013. So Skype for Business is a new version that came out this year in July. It's sometimes referred to Skype for Business 2015. So it's just a new version, a new revision of Link. And what Skype for Business is essentially is Microsoft's answer to the market for unified communication and collaboration solution. And what UC is essentially a place where you can basically launch every single piece of communication that you might need from the same application. Right? So things like presence, things like making a phone call, things like instant messaging, sharing documents, doing audio and video conferences, all of that, instead of using separate siloed applications, you can do directly from the Skype for Business client. Okay, so it's a piece of software that you put on your computer, on your desktop, and from that you're able to launch several modalities of communication all in one place. Okay, so that's what it's all about. And I use Skype for Business every day. I think the job was super well done to make it simple for the end user from the desktop. But of course, it needs a lot of, in the back office, it needs a complex set of servers and different server roles. And that's where, on the back end, it's a bit more complicated, but I have to admit on the user end part, it's beautifully rolled up into a simple application. It's also, Skype for Business is available as software that you can load on your own infrastructure. It's also available by a set of hosting companies, and also available by Microsoft Office 365. Depending on the plans you take, there are enterprise level plans that will include not only the Skype for Business client, but also the back office type server roles running in the cloud. Okay, so that's what at a high level Skype for Business is. And if you look, if you could stand this slide here that you're seeing right now is my attempt to simplify. Okay, so even if it's a busy slide, it's my attempt to simplify the overall architecture of Skype for Business. And there's many more roles. I tried to summarize it to be as simple as possible. So it all starts at the center with what is called Skype for Business Server. So this is like the quarterback, the traffic cop, if you will, that takes care of registering end users. It takes care of providing resources for conferencing, for establishing calls, for configuring. So this it's like a call manager, but for unified communications. Okay, if you move your way to the in that DMZ area, some of the roles you need for interconnecting your infrastructure to the outside world, whether you are federating with Office 365 Cloud, or traveling or remote users, or even federating with other companies. So you need things like Edge Server and reverse proxy. If you move your way down from Skype for Business Server, there's something here labeled Mediation Server. So this is the platform that will convert I'm going to say the proprietary specific Skype for Business infrastructure into standardized SIP, which is the norm these days for how you establish voice over IP calls. So from the SIP interface, you can connect using session border controllers or voice over IP gateways. You can link to SIP trunks, or even good old T1 lines or analog lines from your telco. Right? So that's that lower part is for interconnection with I'm going to say normal telephony. And then to the right, I have a bunch of complementary, they're not necessarily linked products or Skype for Business products, but are complementary. So Office Web Apps allows for users to share documents without having to be Skype for Business users. Active Directory is a central component to any Microsoft, deployment. It's used for domain control and sign-on. Not network sign-on. You have Exchange, Microsoft Exchange, which is an email server, has components for what is called UM, or Unified Mail Server, and that's used, to provide things like voicemail and IVR and those types of functions for Skype for Business. And there's also, for companies that are distributed, there's roles like a survivable branch appliance or survivable branch servers to provide a subset of functionality at these branches and be able to operate in a autonomous manner. So that's like I said, a simplification, an attempt to give you kind of a glimpse of the overall structure. All these icons could be physical computers, and they could be virtual machines. They're all little icons that represent a specific role. The physical way of deploying this can be in any server infrastructure you might prefer. So it could be a physical hardware, or it could be virtual machines in your own private cloud, or it could be virtual machines running in a public cloud. Okay, so that's it for the introduction to Skype for Business. So 4 ways that Sangoma plays or enhances Skype for Business. So the most simplest one is I kind of covered already, is that Sangoma can provide connectivity to the public telephone network for Skype for Business. Okay, so if I go back to my diagram we just went through, I kind of have this big arrow and circle that covers the area I'm just talking about. So the various components that you need to interconnect through the PSTN, whether you're using SIP trunks, using an SBC, session border controller, or if you're using more regular or traditional telephony like a T1 line or E1 line, you need a voice over IP gateway. Okay, so for this, Microsoft doesn't make these components. They rely on partners, and there's a specification, there's a process to get certified that is called Qualified for Skype for Business infrastructure. And Sangoma, took its SBCs and gateways through this third-party lab testing, and you can verify our certifications or qualifications from these links here. So we are posted as a standardized, certified, third-party lab-verified session border controllers and gateways for Link 2013 and Skype for Business. So in terms of products, if I translate all of this into Sangoma products, for the enterprise voice over IP gateways, on the digital side, we have the Vega 100G, the 200G, and the 400G. So they range from a single T1E1 line to 2 T1E1 lines, and for up to 4 T1E1 lines. Okay, so depending on the size of your deployment, you have a good selection. Typically with a single T1, that would represent an office of about 100, about 4-to-1 ratio. So we can cover easily any office, up to about 500 users. Okay, so these are the gateways. They're all certified. They're all SIP compatible. They're all, they all have various flavors of ISDN, of R2 signaling, which is very popular in still in Latin America, and CAS PSTN protocols if you need to connect behind another PBX. Okay. And if you are looking at SIP trunking, then you drive the need for session border control. So again, we have a whole suite of products that range from SMB level, that cover about, from 5 to 60 sessions, all the way to these very large SBCs, very large enterprise call center type with up to 4,000 sessions. Okay, so we have a series of appliances, but we also have a software version. This is kind of shadowed image here with the dotted line is we have a software version of our SBC. So if you as a customer or integrator need to deploy the customer in a virtualized manner, then all the functionality of our SBCs is available in the virtual machine software. Okay, so there's a bunch of features. What's nice with these SBCs is they run the exact same firmware. So any product you may start with, if you have to move, start with a small machine and then move to a bigger machine, any of your technical staff will be familiar. It's the same GUIs, it's the same environment, the same ways of configuring. It's the same firmware, just a higher port count. So, okay, so now moving to number 2. So number 1, we provide solutions to interconnect LE, Link, or Skype for business deployment to the PSTN. Okay. Number 2, simplify Office 365 hybrid deployment. So I mentioned earlier there's a Office 365, various plans offer ways of running Link or Skype for business in the cloud. Okay, so in this another complex diagram, but I won't go through it in detail. I'm just going to point to you. So to the right of this page here, you have this orange square which represents what would be sitting in the cloud of Office 365 if you subscribe to a plan that is called E4. Okay, so that's what it's called, Office 365 E4. You have a bunch of infrastructure there, and an hybrid deployment is to extract the Link application. Instead of running it in the cloud, you run on the customer prem. So basically, that's the other half of my diagram. All the stuff that you would need at the customer prem, okay, to be able to run Link. And this is called a on-premise. This is called a hybrid because you have part of your deployment, of your domain deployment that is at the customer prem, and the rest is sitting in the cloud. So this is why this is called hybrid. Okay, and the reason you want to do that is to be able to use Link as a replacement to your PBX, as a way to be able to place calls to the PSTN. Okay, you cannot today. It's been announced, but it's not today available that you can make PSTN phone calls from an Office 365 virtual user. There's no. You can use Link. You can make link-to-link calls, but to obtain DID numbers, to connect to SIP trunks or T1 lines, that's not available from the cloud. So when you need that, you need to install a hybrid solution. So one of the problems with a hybrid is it can be quite complex. Okay, there's a lot of roles, there's a lot of modes. It can be quite complex for users, especially for small businesses that are attracted by Office 365. So what we've done is, if you kind of flip between the two pages, what we've done is this shaded area we've collapsed into one box, okay? And this is what we call Skype for Business Express platform. Okay, so it's an appliance. Okay, it runs all these various modules that or roles that I showed, including a gateway, including an SBC, and several, Windows, Hyper-V, Skype for Business front-end server, Edge server, all these icons that you've seen so far, all these roles are running on this platform. Okay, and here's a picture of what it looks like. It's a 1U box. It has room to put T1U1 cards. It has room to put DSP cards for the SBCs. And it's a Windows Server 2012 box, so it runs all of the various roles that you need for Link. So, like I said, it's loaded with features. I'm not going to step through all of these, but you can see, it comes with Windows, it comes with Hyper-V platform, it comes with our gateway and SBCs, and it comes with several of these roles that you need to run. The Skype for Business server, mediation server, Edge. We have an Active Directory, reverse proxy, Office web apps, and the synchronization, the federation services tools that you need to authenticate or connect with the Microsoft Cloud. And here a glimpse of the specs, with high-performing SSDs available in dual AC or DC power, and it's been benchmarked to run up to 1,000 Link users. So 1,000 Link users running in a box that provides all the connectivity you need in a 1U convenient platform. Okay, so that was number 2, simplifying Office 365. Okay, so number 3, integrate large amounts of analog lines. And now I'm sure a lot of you are frowning. Well, why is he talking about analog lines with Skype for Business and unified communications? The fact is, many companies that consider Link or Skype for Business as their new means of communications, they have an existing infrastructure, they have existing deployments, and they can't in one swoop completely change everything. And it's very true for large enterprise that have large campuses, or colleges, university with student dormitories, for instance, or even like hotels, right? So a lot of these verticals have a lot of analog lines. They don't deploy high-end digital phones in a hotel room, or they don't put super high-end phones in a student dorm. So there's a lot of these analog lines that need to stay analog, even if the corporate office or the admin office is moving to Link. So many times when a customer is thinking about moving to Link, they have all this legacy stuff that they scratch their heads. How do I integrate? Okay, so while we're talking about advanced UC, you cannot forget or ignore this kind of legacy equipment. So in this case, what you do is, I have another diagram here, but essentially, you have Link server, Skype for Business server, SBCs. You can use analog gateways to connect these analog lines and bring them in as normal extensions to Link, right? So they're not on a special dial plan or a different set of extensions. Using a gateway and configuring the topology of Link and Skype for Business properly, these will appear as normal extensions. Okay, so it's a nice integration. And if you have a lot of analog lines, what you'll need is high-density analog to voice over IP gateway. So in the case of Sangoma, what we provide, we have 2 products. We have what we call the Vega 3000G, which supports up to 24 analog lines, okay, in a very convenient small 1U form factor. And we have another one in the same 1U form factor, that Vega 5000, that supports 50 analog lines. Okay, so all of them 1U, all of them have convenient RJ21 like dense Amphenol type connectors. one of the very nice features that we have is a long loop reach. We can go up to 5 miles or about 8 kilometers. Okay, so in the case of, if you picture a deployment where there's several buildings, you're able to keep the Vega 5000 gateways in the same IT room, as opposed to having to go deploy them and manage them in multiple closets all over the campus. We have a customer in the US, a university, that has deployed 500 analog lines using our Vega 5000, okay, and all of them are sitting right next to their Link server. They didn't have to go out, and for the IT department, this is great because it makes it much easier for them to manage and monitor and do moves and changes. All of that is much easier for them because it's closer to the physical place where they spend most of their time. Okay, so that's for the analog side. And the fourth is extending the feature set of Skype for Business. So if you look at Skype for Business, it provides great unified communication features, video conferencing, document sharing, that kind of stuff. But if you're replacing your PBX with Skype for Business, there's things like IVR or like auto attendant or voicemail, or even like simple call center type, inbound queuing for a small support team. You don't really have those features in Link, okay? And typically they might need integration, like even more complex integration that I've shown. So, if you need IVR or voicemail, you would integrate with Microsoft Exchange UM. If you want call center type functionality, you likely need third-party applications that are compatible with Link. So this could be okay, right? It's okay maybe for larger organizations that have more complex deployments, but for the small business, the small enterprise that's considering Link, it might be a bit scary for them. So one way we're proposing here is, Sangoma is now the sponsor and owner of the free PBX software, and it's a very complete PBX in itself. We have thousands of installations that happen every month. But it can also be used as to front-end Link. So here what I'm showing is a free PBX appliance that we sell, we load with free PBX, and we can use it to front-end a Link installation. And what the free PBX appliance can do is provide all these features of auto-attendant, individual voicemail, even the call center, like simple ACD queuing type. And also what's nice is you can set up your dial plan so you can pair your desktop phone that I'm showing here, like a SIP phone, and pair your Link client, okay? And in fact, if you look at this diagram, this is exactly how Sangoma is set up as a company, right? We of course use our own PBX for normal phone communication, if you will, and we use our Link Express or Skype for Business Express to enable unified communications. And then the user, if somebody calls my extension, it will ring simultaneously both my desk phone, but also my Link client software that rides on my computer. And I have the choice to answer it, from the phone or answer it from the Link client. Okay, and so this is a really nice complementarity, right? You can enable unified communication if you're using free PBX. You can also enable a lot of these, simple features you would expect, like auto-attendant voicemail, simple ACD, ring groups, things like that, by leveraging free PBX and use them in combination for deployment. So we have, so this number 4 kind of focuses on leveraging the free PBX applications. We have 4 different appliances. Of course, the software is available as download as well, but we also have these kind of ready-to-go appliances that range from 50 users all the way to 1,000 users. Okay, and that's about it. That's what I have. I run through a lot of slides. Wondering if you have any questions at this time.
Yes, thanks, Frederick. So we do have some questions that came in throughout the presentation. So this one, we have a question here. Is the survivable branch server the same as the SFB server? So maybe if you can explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, okay. So a survivable branch server is a lightweight version of Skype for Business server. What it does is it keeps a registration of the remote user. So if you could picture, a branch office where you have an SBS, a variable branch server, a user there, and then you have the central office, the headquarters, where you have a full-fledged link deployment. So what happens is when the link client registers, it will do so through the SBS server, okay? And so in normal conditions, everything, all your calls, all your interaction with Link will be handled by the headquarter Link or Skype for Business server. When the communication drops, let's say you lose the internet connection, cable is cut, whatever, then the Skype for Business server will take over, will take care of communications. But you fall to a subset, like you can't do video, for instance. You will be able essentially to do basic instant messaging between the users at the branch, and you'll be able to make local phone calls to the PSTN. So that's the difference. But it provides some level of survivability in case of communication cut between the branch and the headquarters.
Great. We have another question here. I guess it's in reference to the diagram that you had. So who provides the mediation server?
Yeah. So mediation server is part of Link or Skype for Business, and it's provided by Microsoft. So when you start deploying Skype for Business server, it's a bit if you could picture if it was on a CD and you pop the CD in your server and there's an installation menu that starts, you can pick the various roles you want to install. It's the same for Windows 2012. You can decide to install the OS with maybe Active Directory and IIS server, and there's all kinds of options. So it's very similar in that case for Link or Skype for Business. So mediation server is a Skype for Business role, and it is provided by Microsoft.
Okay, Frederick, we have a question here. How many users can this box handle? So I guess the SFB box. And can you build out clusters to add more capacity?
Okay, so on the first question, we have benchmarked our box to 1,000 Skype for Business users. The way we've done it is we've used the Microsoft tools that they provide to verify voice quality and performance metrics. So we've run and they provide different traffic models. So we've run a fairly complex model. It simulates up to 1,000 users of people checking their voicemail, people doing IM, people doing sharing or video conferencing, making normal phone calls, things like that, right? It's a mix of, so it's some traffic model, and we've benchmarked with, I think, the most high-end traffic-intensive model up to 1,000. Okay, so that's what we have. If you want to cluster them, you cannot really use it to augment beyond 1,000. But what you could do is you could cluster them and use what is called pool pairing to provide disaster recovery. So some customers of ours, say, well, I have 1,000 users or I have 500 users. Okay, so they want to have some sort of redundancy. So what they put is a second box. Each of them handle their subset of 500 users. Okay, and if one box failed, you can use a feature that is called pool pairing. So the 500 users that suddenly lose service now will register to the active box. Okay, so but you have to make sure, in our case, you have to make sure that the sum is never beyond 1,000. That's what we that's what we decided to focus at Sangoma, is on the 1,000 and less kind of customer. If you are above that, my recommendation would be to use your own servers, your own infrastructure, and for connectivity to PSTN, then you can use our SBCs and gateways that I talked in point number 1.
Great. Frederick, so we have a question here about hybrid deployments. Is it possible to have part of the users served by Office 365, 365?
Yes. Yes, so you can split, they call it split domain sometimes, a hybrid deployment. So you can have users that are only in the cloud, and you can have users that are on the physical platform in the office. The difference, they won't have the same, they won't have the same feature set. So the people that live only in the cloud will not be able to make PSTN calls from the cloud. Okay, we can only, to do that, those users need to be on-premise users. But then, they still have access to any link-to-link features, right? So they can IM to any users of the domain. They can make conference calls. They can share a document. All of that is available. What's not available is the ability to place a call to the PSTN for the users that live in the cloud. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we had a question here. So if we go for a free PBX front end, does this mean we no longer need special link certified VoIP phones?
You're right. You could use your desk phones. There, it becomes more of a preference of the end users. But in effect, you could say that. You could say, with a free PBX front end, I can use that as my PBX, and I can put as many SIP phones as I want, any models. Sangoma free PBX supports like hundreds of models and firmware versions of SIP phones, so you have a wide choice there, and that can be used as a desk phone for your users. And then for when they need link or when they need to use UC features, they can do so from the software client that runs on their computer. Yep.
Great. Thanks for getting that answer. And this question is about licenses. So what about Microsoft licenses? Are these included in the Sangoma package?
Yeah. So we pre-install all the software, the Windows, all the link roles, but we do not resell the licenses. Number one, there's a few reasons. Number one is, we are not Sangoma. We partner with a lot of Microsoft Gold partners, and that's their livelihood. So we don't want to start competing against Microsoft Gold partners that sell their services to deploy, install, integrate Microsoft Link. And part of their businesses a lot of time is to resell licenses. The other reason is we're not a Gold partner at Sangoma, so we don't have access to special pricing, and so if we just end up reselling, we end up shooting ourselves in the foot, right? Our pricing is not competitive. So we prefer to leave that to our partners, and what we offer to these partners is our expertise in telecom. They have the expertise in Microsoft, and we have our expertise in telecom, and together we can team up and deliver solutions to end users. But
cool.
we do not provide licenses.
We have a question here about, I guess, upgrading SFB when you're currently running Sangoma Microsoft Link Express.
Yes, so there's a few ways. Microsoft provides, just as when you get Windows 10 for your desktop, there's ways to upgrade from Windows 7 or Windows 8. So same mechanisms have been provided, similar mechanisms, a bit more complex, but nonetheless, you can upgrade your Link 2013 software, whether it's the Edge server, mediation server, front-end server. All of these have procedures on the TechNet Microsoft website that explains how to upgrade. We provide also a SKU. We have an orderable part number where you can order from us dual SSD drives that come with a Skype for Business image, but you'll have, if you do this hard disk swap in our Link Express platform, then you'll have to redo your configuration. But that's another way of doing. So depending if you have the equipment in stock and it's not been deployed, I would do the hard drive swap. If you have deployed at a customer site, I would follow the live upgrades procedures that Microsoft provides.
Okay, we have a question here about multi-tenants. Can we have multi-tenants on the Link Express?
No, there's no. Microsoft used to have a multi-tenant hosting version of the very large enterprise server, but that is no longer. That would not have been able to run on our box anyways, because we're not targeting hundreds of thousands of users. We're targeting 1,000 or less. But with Skype for Business, also Microsoft has retired the multi-tenant. So if you want to host, basically it's either you can partners can resell Office 365. Okay, Microsoft allows resellers to make good money there, or you can build your own infrastructure. Either you could start stacking our appliances, or you could start running VM instances for each customer, but there's no multi-tenant. No.
Okay, great. We have a question here. This one, maybe it's a little more specific, but it's in the free PBX appliance, we should have the IP phone register against it, correct? Or is the Link client can't be registered against free PBX?
So the Link client registers with the Skype for Business server, and the SIP phones that you saw in my diagram registers with the free PBX software. So they register separately, but you tie it all up in the dial plan of the PBX. So
Great.
if you want to set up like a simultaneous ring on 2 extensions, or setting up shadow extensions. So in the case of Sangoma, every single user, when somebody calls our extensions, it rings both at the same time, right? It rings both our SIP phone and our Link client.
All right, we have a question here. So why do you need an SBC, between a free PBX and a mediation server?
Yes, so it's not mandatory. I sell SBC, so I'd like very much to sell them, but it's not mandatory. One of the reasons that we see the most is because Microsoft SIP works only with TCP, okay, and the support for TCP is not necessarily always great on FreePBX/*. So that's where people use the SBC to do conversion between UDP to TCP. So that's one of the roles that an SBC can do. In the case of Sangoma, that's exactly what we're using it for. We're also using our SBC to it gets you ready to move to SIP trunking as well, right? So if as a company you're moving away from T1, E1 lines or analog lines, then you could move to a SIP trunk, and using an SBC to kind of protect, isolate your servers from a public IP address, then it's also a nice thing to have, but it's not mandatory.
Okay, we have a question here about HA. So is HA possible for Skype for Business or Link Express?
Yeah, so it's more, I will describe it more as a disaster recovery scenario. So as opposed to HA, which for me means 2 active systems and one fails, the other one picks up, no calls drop. So it's more like in the case of disaster recovery is if you lose a server, then all the users will re-register, and then all the next calls will happen from the other box. So yes, you can put 2 machines side by side, or even you can put them in geographically dispersed 2 geographic points. Okay, and what you do is you use a feature that comes with Microsoft Skype for Business, and it's called pool pairing. Okay? So pool pairing allows you to have dual registrations for the Link client, allows to synchronize configuration between 2 Skype for Business server, and this is how you can do disaster recovery kind of scenarios. Yeah. So
Perfect.
yes.
So we have a question here about hybrid setup. So can a hybrid setup with FreePBX along with an SPC direct to Office 365?
Can a hybrid be set up with a
With,
free PBX along with an SBC direct to Office? So the integration with Office 365 does not happen with the SBC. It happens with the Edge server. So if you, in the diagram, where you do media integration with Office 365, it's through this Edge server. So Edge server is another Skype for Business role. It sits on our box, and there's also a Skype, an Edge server in the cloud, and this is where you set up the SIP and the media when you need, signaling and media transfers between your on-premise and the cloud. It's done through the Edge server, not the SBC. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Frederick. I think that's all the questions that we have, and I
Great.
thank everyone
Thank you
for
very much.
typing them
Yeah,
in.
thank you very much for all these questions and staying longer.
I know.
But this is great. Yes.
Yeah. So on behalf of Frederick, I want to thank everyone for joining us this week, and hopefully you've gained a lot more knowledge about Skype for Business. Thank you, and we hope to see you at the next Ask the Expert webinar. I will also include the link for the webinar registration as well. So we hope to see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for coming.